Okay, so setting up an Azure Virtual Desktop can seem like a daunting task, right? Well, what if I told you that in just a few minutes, you could not only have your AVD up and running, but also optimized for cloud-based development with Docker, Visual Studio Code, and even Git. Today, we're going to jump into a step-by-step guide to seamlessly launch your AVD environment. And as a bonus, I'll show you how to supercharge it with essential development tools using one single PowerShell script. Now, on top of that, we're also going to go through the Azure Calculator. I'm going to show you exactly how much this is going to cost you. And I'm also going to share some tips and tricks on how you can save money. Okay, so why even bother with AVD or cloud computing? Well, mastering AVD means more than just having a cloud-based setup. It's about unleashing your potential to develop, create, and collaborate anywhere in the world with efficiency and ease. From coding in the cloud to developing scalable web apps in this video, and together we'll tap into everything AVD's got to offer. Okay, so with all that said, in this video, we'll be focusing on what really matters, making you more productive and making your projects more manageable. So with that, let's jump into it. Okay, so before we jump into creating an Azure Virtual Desktop, before we even start going to the Azure portal, I feel like it's super important to talk about pricing first. Now, there's a huge misconception of Azure and pricing, and I thought, you know what, let's have a talk about the billing and the pricing calculator first before we jump into this. What you can do as well is navigate to the pricing calculator. You can literally go to Bing or Google and just type in Azure Calculator and you'll get to this page. At the search bar right there, I literally just search Azure Virtual Desktop, and right here we have the Azure Virtual Desktop. Now, first things first, when you click on it, it is going to populate an estimate for you. Now, with that said, the region is super important. Throughout this entire step-by-step video, I am using West US 2. Obviously, you want to use whatever region is closest to you. And the next one, it's asking you for the type, so either pooled or personal. Now, this is super important. Later on in the video, I will explain the difference between pooled and personal, but for now, we're just going to select pooled. The next one, it's going to ask you for the session. So by default, we always want to go for multi-session, and the workload type, because you are going to be a developer, or if you're in a development team, it's most likely going to be medium or heavy. Okay, so now with that selected, the next is connectivity. When we look at the scaling options, we have scaling plan and constant availability. Because we are not going to get this VM to run constantly 24/7, we're definitely going to go for the scaling plan. Now, by default, this is going to be a super high number because this is normally meant for enterprise. I've changed this to only one user because this video is focused on creating one virtual machine. Do let me know in the comments below if you want me to create a video where we spin up hundreds of VMs at the same time. Next, it's asking us for total usage hours. Now, by default, this is normally set to a much higher number, and I changed this to 120. The reason I'm going for 120 is because I calculated based on a 40-hour work week, essentially doing 8 hours a day on this virtual machine. Now, obviously, you can also scale this down even more. If you're not going to work consistent 8 hours on a virtual machine, then obviously this number is going to be less. And the less this number is going to be, the cheaper your Azure virtual machine will be at the end of the day. Also, looking at peak concurrency, I set that to 90%, but you can also set that to 100%, and that will also slightly change it. Next, it's talking about external users. Now, for this video, we're not going to worry about that. Now, when it comes to virtual machines, you do have a significant amount of options to choose from a 1-core to a 4-core with 7 gigs of RAM, 8-core, whatever you like, you can basically select it here. For this video, we went for a D version 4, not a D version 5, but the D version 4. And by the way, if you want to filter this, you can also change it on the left-hand side here, and we can change it to the D series, which I'm going to go for now, the D series 4. Just want to scroll down to the bottom and make sure I'm selecting the correct one. And that's going to be this one, D version 4. And here you can see that we do have it basically filtered down, and here we have the options. Now, for this video, we are going for that 4-core CPU, 16 gigs of RAM, which should be good enough, but we can always scale it up or down later on. Now, the next step is talking about the OS size. By default, I leave this as is. And when you look at this at the bottom, and we set this to pay as you go, you can see that it's only going to cost us $27 a month. Now, one thing about Azure that you need to remember is that you don't get charged when you create the virtual machine. You only get charged once you've accumulated that entire cost. So what does that mean? It means that, let's say you run this virtual machine for an entire month. This is kind of the cost that you're going to look at. Also, what you can do is you can sign up for a year or a 3-year term, and that might also make it a lot cheaper. All right, so now that we have a rough idea of what the base cost is going to be for the Azure virtual machine or the virtual desktop, the other thing that they also add to it is the storage. So here you can see I've selected premium storage, and in this video, we will be using premium storage. I do like the premium SSD a little bit better. I feel like it's a little faster. And when we scroll down, we look at file storage. They're not charging for that. That is good. Same with bandwidth. They're not charging for that. And then the total cost, the monthly cost, would be about $45 a month. Now, obviously you can play around with these numbers to get it even cheaper or give it even more expensive. Whatever fits you or whatever fits you best, you can definitely apply it in this calculator and it will give you a rough estimate of how much it's going to cost. All right, so that is the basics of the Azure Calculator. In the next chapter, we're actually going to start setting up everything. We're going to start with the resource group and get things going. All right, so let's get things going here. Before we jump into creating the Azure Virtual Desktop, we first need to look at our users and our groups of our entire organization. Now, one quick thing, this is a free account that I'm using, and I've got a link in the description below of this video where you can click on it and create a free Azure account to follow me step by step in creating this Azure Virtual Desktop. First things first, we are going to navigate to Microsoft Entra. Now you can see right at the top, I have it right here. Now, if you don't have it there, you can hit the search bar at the top right here and you can search Entra. So by just searching Entra, it will be right at the top. So let's navigate over to that. I do have a fake organization here, or an organization that I just quickly put together for demo purposes. And when we go to the users, you will see that I have quite a significant amount of users. Now, obviously from an enterprise level, this is quite small, but for our demo purposes, this is going to work just fine. The other thing I also did is create groups. So I do have a couple of groups here. I have an accounting group. I've got back-end development groups, front-end marketing and sales. And within those groups, when you click on accounting, for example, and we go to the members, we'll see there's a couple of users there. So for this demo and for this video, we want to create a Azure Virtual Desktop for our backend developers. So we want our backend developers to be able to use this AVD to develop in. So navigate back to the users. One thing we do want to do is create specific groups that we are going to use for AVD. So let's go back to groups here on the left-hand side and let's go and create a new group. Now I am going to call this group AVD users. Now, obviously you can name it whatever you want, or if you have any specific naming conventions that you follow, definitely want to do that. The group type is going to be security. We're not going to go for Microsoft 365 because we are going to use this group within the Azure space. I'm going to hit create. So when we hit refresh here, it's going to show AVD users. The next group I want to create is for the administrators of this AVD environment. So I'm just going to type in AVD-admin. Once I've typed that in, we're going to hit create. Okay, so with that said, when we hit refresh here on the groups, we're going to see AVD admin. We're going to see AVD users. We are going to use this later on in the video, and this is super important, especially if we want to open up the AVD for everyone to access it. So with that, the next step I want to do is assign users to our AVD users group. So I'm going to click on that, go to members and add members. When we click on the group, I want to add the backend dev team as well as the front end dev team group to this group, which will be the AVD users. Now, when we hit refresh, we're going to see that those two groups are going to be there, which is perfect. That is exactly what I want. Let's navigate back to home. The next step we're going to do is set up a resource group. Now, resource group is basically your bucket where everything resides in, and that is normally the first step, the first thing that you want to do when working with any type of Azure products or services. So in the resource group, to make sure that we select the subscription. Now, I'm using the free trial here. That's why it's saying subscription number 1. The name that we're going to use for this resource group is going to be AVD General. I'm going to use General. Now, I am located on the west side of the US or North America, so I'm going to say West US 2 for this one. Obviously, you want to select one that is closest to you. While it's creating, we do want to make sure that we create a virtual network. So going back to home, we want to make sure that we click on virtual network right here, and we're going to set up a virtual network. Now, when we do that, we do want to make sure that we select AVD General, and this is kind of where things can go haywire. You do want to make sure that your network is within the same region. Super important, otherwise this stuff is not going to work. Okay, so we're going to add AVD Virtual Network. I do want to change that underscore to a hyphen. Now, again, naming convention, it's completely up to you. Now, let's hit next. It's going to ask us a bunch of stuff. All of these items are extra costs that will be accumulated to your monthly costs. For this demo and for the simplicity of this demo, going to ignore this. Let's go to next and let's get it to assign IP version for address space. We're going to say next. Tags, we're going to leave that out. Make sure to drop in the comments below of this video if you want me to create a more in-depth video about tags in Azure and why tags even exist. What do we use it for? Now with that done, click next and it's going to review everything and we will hit create. So just quickly recap, we created that resource group and we also created that virtual network so we can see everything in here. So when we click on it, you're going to see nothing is really going on in here. We can see, however, that the virtual network is within this group. So that's definitely a good step. Next, we're going to click home and we will now start setting up our Azure Virtual Desktop. What we want to do, we want to click on Azure Virtual Desktop at the top. If you don't have that, again, in the search bar, you can search for Azure Virtual Desktop and it will appear. So you can see that it's appearing right there. So let's click on that. Now, when you look at the screen, it can be overwhelming. Like there's a lot going on here, but let's start from the top and let's go through this slowly. The first thing you always want to do is set up a couple of host pools. We're going to click on host pool right here and we're going to create our first host pool. And it's going to ask you a couple of questions. Now, first off, obviously subscription, you're going to select the default subscription you want it under. Next, we're going to select our resource group, which is going to be AVD General. And now we're going to give this host pool a name. So I'm going to call it AVD Dev HP for host pool. So I know that this is going to be for the dev team. I also want to make sure that it's in the same region, which is going to be West US 2. Validation environment, we are going to say no for the simplicity of this demonstration. And then it asks us preferred app. So do we want desktop or remote app? Now the differences between the two is desktop is going to be a full AVD or virtual desktop, where remote app is only going to be a specific application. Again, drop in the comments below if you want me to create a video about remote app and why we should and should not use that. Next, we're going to select our host pool. Now you get two types here. You get personal and you get pooled. Now personal is when we set up a desktop environment specifically only for one user. Pooled is where we'll set up a desktop for multiple users. Now, let's say multiple developers are going to use one virtual machine, we will use pooled. So again, for simplicity purposes, we will select pool. And now it's going to touch base on load balancing algorithm, which we're going to have breadth first or depth first. Again, drop in the comments below if you want me to break out and explain a little bit more what these two are and why you shouldn't use it. I'm just going to go for the first one right here. The max session limit, we're going to leave that out for now. Next, we will go to virtual machine and now we will set up the virtual machines. We're going to say yes because I want to create it right now. And then it's going to ask you for a name prefix. So I am going to go for development as a prefix for the virtual machine. So essentially every time you create new virtual machines, it will use development. I'll show you a little bit later on in this video what I mean about this. Next, we're going to select the virtual machine location. Again, we're going to go for West US 2. You're going to select the one that is closest to you, and availability option, simplicity of this demo, I'm going to go for no. Once that's done, we do want to select an image. So the image I'm going to go for is Windows 11 Enterprise Multi-Session. And you're going to see that it also adds Microsoft 365 apps. So this is essentially the image it's going to use. It's going to install Windows 11 for us, and it's going to be the enterprise version. It's also going to allow multi-session. And with that, it's also going to come with Microsoft 365 application. So we're going to select that one. Now, this is kind of where we touched base earlier on in the video about pricing structure. Now that you know a little bit more about pricing, this is going to make a lot of sense. So let's click on that and let's just have a quick look. Now, here's the thing is you need to select the one that's going to fit your budget as well as the performance that you need. So on the right-hand side, it will show you the cost associated to that. Again, this cost is per month, and this is if the virtual machine is running non-stop. So in our case, later on in this video, in the bonus content, I will show you how to get this pricing down significantly and to make sure that you pay way less than what is predicted here. And also on top of that, this is an estimated cost. It doesn't mean that when we click on this right now, it will deduct that amount off your balance. So with that, I'm going to go for D4S version 3. It has 4 CPUs, 16 gigs of RAM. This should be good enough for me to get things going for our developers. So I'm going to click on that and we're going to select that. Now, the next step or the next question is going to ask you is how many VMs. Again, simplicity, we're just going to go for one VM. With the OS disk space, I like to go for premium. You'll definitely see a performance difference between standard and premium. Boot diagnostics, we are going to make sure we leave enable with managed storage account. The next thing is we need to assign a virtual network to the specific VM. This is going to be specifically to that virtual network that we created earlier. So I'm going to select AVD virtual network, and the subnet as well as the network security, we're going to leave that just as is. Okay, next it's going to ask us how we want to join. How are we actually going to join this Azure virtual machine? So clicking on this, we are going to select Microsoft Entra, and this kind of connects to that previous part of this video where we set up those users. Next, it's asking us to enroll VM with Intune. Now, in this demo and in this environment, I don't have Intune activated or installed. At this step, I'm just going to say no. Okay, then it's asking us for the virtual machine administrator account. So here you can type in a default admin username as well as a password that you are going to use. Once that's all done, we do want to click next. So we're just going to say no at this stage. We're going to do this after once all of this is created. Then it's going to ask us for diagnostic settings. So I am just going to skip that for simplicity purposes. Same with the tags, and we are going to hit review and create and hit create. Now, normally this does take a while for everything to set up. So if 10 minutes, 15 minutes go past and you're still waiting for it to set up, just know that that is absolutely normal. Okay, so at this stage, my AVD, my virtual machine is still spinning up. So when we click on the notifications, we can see that deployment is still in progress. This does take some time, like we're already 8 minutes in and it's still creating everything. But one thing I did notice though, is when I navigate to AVD General, we look at this bucket, we look at this resource group, I can see that my virtual machine is already there. We have development-0. So everything is kind of moving into the right direction. So let's navigate over to the host pool and just click on that. Let's have a quick look. Now, one thing you're going to notice, which is pretty normal, is you're going to see one virtual machine, but it's going to say can't connect. So that's definitely something that we do need to fix up. And that's part of this chapter. We will focus on getting that up and running correctly. So at this stage, we cannot properly connect to this virtual machine. When we click on virtual machine over here, we can see we have development-0. It is running, but the health state says unavailable. Clicking on development-0, it's just quickly showing us the session host. So everything looks good at this stage. Next step here is we are going to set up that workspace. Let's go to home and let's click on Azure Virtual Desktop. You should be able to see that at the top right now. Again, if you don't see it, you can always search it. Let's click on that. Now, we've essentially created our host pool. And when we go to application groups, you're going to see it already created the application group for us, which is perfect. We will touch base on this in a little bit. But one thing I do want to do is go to workspaces and let's set up a proper workspace. So going to create a new workspace. Essentially, a workspace is a logical grouping of applications. So if we have a bunch of virtual machines for developers, we will create a workspace for the developers. If we have a bunch of machines for the accountants, we will create a specific workspace for the accountants. Okay, again, subscription, default subscription. We will select the resource group, which is going to be AVD General. Now we got to give it a name, AVD Dev General. With that said, we're going to give it a nice little friendly name, Development General. And for the simplicity purposes, I'm going to leave description out. Now, next it's going to ask you for that location. Again, we want to go for West US 2. We want to keep everything within the same region. Once that's done, we will review and create. So it's going to do a quick validation, make sure everything is okay. And again, if we want to create a bunch of VMs, either personal or pooled for the sales team, then we will create a specific work group or a workspace for them. By the way, on the right-hand side, it's showing that the workspace is created. That is all good. So let's click on home and let's go to AVD General. By the way, we can still see that deployment is in progress for AVD General. We definitely want to give that some time to process. All right, so there I can see that the deployment has successfully completed. Everything is good and everything is up and running. So in the next chapter of this video, we will look at assigning users. We will look at assigning specific roles within our resource group, also getting everything ready so that we can start using our Azure Virtual Desktop. All right, so in this chapter, we are focusing on user settings, user groups, RDP settings, and getting everything ready so that we can start using our AVD. All right, so with that, navigating back to our AVD general, let's navigate to our application group, because one thing I do want to do is go to assignments. And essentially what we're going to do now is specifically assign those user groups that we created earlier. We're going to assign that so they can use this specific application group. So again, you're going to see all the users here. We're just going to select groups so that we can go and select those specific groups. So I am going to add AVD admin as well as AVD users to this application group. So selecting both of them, and we will be adding them to this specific group. So this normally takes a second or two and then it's done. So which in this case, it's done. Now that that's completed, let's navigate back to AVD general. I do want to go to our workspace. I just want to make sure everything is correct here. Now, make sure to carefully follow all these steps, because you can get in a situation where the AVD is not working because you might have skipped a step. With that said, let's go to application groups. I do want to add an application group to this workspace. So let's hit add. Here it's going to show us our application group. So we're going to click on that. We're going to click the little plus button and select. So now that will assign it to it. So those users can now have access to this specific workspace. All right, so the next step that we need to do is add access control to our AVD general resource group. So clicking on AVD general, let's navigate to access control. And what we want to do now is add a role assignment. So essentially what we're doing here is we're going to allow virtual machine access through this resource group. So I'm just going to type in virtual machine. And when you type that in, the one that we do want to add is a virtual machine user login. It's basically telling us in the description that view virtual machines in the portal login as a regular user. That's the one that we do want. This is super important, this step. Otherwise the end result won't work properly. When we do this, we do want to select a specific member group. So I'm going to select that members. And again, this is going to pop up. And the one that we do want to add is AVD users, and see how important those users and user groups are that we originally created in this video. Super important for all of this to work properly. Okay, next we're going to click on next and we're going to say review and assign. So now it's going to assign that. But here's another thing. We do need to add the admin as well. So let's go and add another role assignment. And again, I'm going to type in virtual machine, if I can spell that correctly. So let's type in virtual machine. And the one that I want to add is the administrator login. Again, let's click next, select members. And the one that we want to add is AVD admin. And let's hit select, review and assign. And once that's done, click on review and assign again, and that will properly assign everything. Okay, so at this stage, we added access control to our resource group. One thing I do want to do is navigate back to home and click on AVD general again. Let's just have a peek at everything. I do want to click on the virtual machine. I want to make sure everything is working here. And one way to know if this is working, on the left hand side, you can scroll right to the bottom, and we do want to look for boot diagnostics. You're going to click on that. And when you click on that, it can show us our login screen. So at this point, we do know that this virtual machine is running perfectly. Okay, so at this stage, we should be able to go and test everything and see if our users have access to this development environment. Now, just a quick side note, my account is part of that development team, so I should be able to connect to everything if everything is running smoothly. So to connect to this virtual machines, you have two options. You can either install remote desktop from Microsoft on your Windows or Mac, or you can use the web client. In the description of this video, I do have all the links that you need to be able to do the entire video. One of those links is going to be that link to connect to our AVD using the web browser. Now, with that all said, if you can't find the link, one thing you can also do is open up Bing. In Bing, type in RD Web. When you type in RD Web, the first one right at the top, that's the one that we're going to use. So you're going to click on that, and then we're going to properly sign in. Now, I've already signed in, and that's why I can see everything. But here you can see we have our desktop that we just created. Now, one thing I do want to show you though is when we go to Workspace and we click on this, you're going to see that the Workspace name is Development General, which is that friendly name that we created. When we go to the actual RDP client, you're going to see that that is what that means right here. Now, what we can do is double click on this virtual machine, click allow, and it is going to properly connect. Okay, so before we continue, there's one little small thing that we do need to set. Otherwise, we're going to end up in an infinite loop and we won't be able to properly log in to our AVD. So let's quickly navigate back to Azure. I'm going to minimize or exit the full screen here. Let's go back to AVD, click on home, go to AVD general. And one thing that we do need to set is for it to accept Microsoft Entra as part of our login sequence. So to do that, we will navigate to our host pool. And on the left-hand side, we will see RDP properties underneath settings. We're going to click on that. And you're going to see here that it is not configured. Click on this. And we want to say connection will be used using Microsoft Entra authentication. So we're going to click on that, hit save. Let's go back. Let's double click on this, click on allow. It's going to ask our username and password. Drop it in here, drop in my password, hit submit. We're just going to say reconnect. And when you try it again, it will automatically go and allow you to connect using Microsoft Entra, which we could see right there. And there we go. It essentially connected to our virtual machine. So this normally takes a second or two. We'll give you a blank screen. That is absolutely normal. Now, one of the cool things that I do like about the web client is it has the option to enter full screen, which once you've clicked on that, it's going to give you a full screen view. And here you go. Our virtual desktop is setting up. Now, the next step is I want to show you how to connect to this Azure Virtual Desktop using RDP. And I'm going to first show you how to do it on a Mac, and then I'm going to show you how to do it on a PC coming up. In the previous chapter, we have successfully connected to our Azure virtual machine using the web client. But in this chapter, I'm going to show you how to properly connect to it using a Mac as well as a PC. So with that all said, let's close this all down. So I'm literally just going to hit the little X there, get out of this. I'm also going to close the web client. Let's navigate over, and the application that I have installed on the Mac is the Microsoft Remote Desktop. You can access or get it by going to the App Store and searching for that. So when I click the search here, I can search it by just typing in Remote Desktop. And once we've typed that in and searched, you're going to see it's the first option here. It's the Microsoft Remote Desktop. If you don't have it on your Mac, just go ahead and install it. Once you have it installed or activated, you're going to see that you have access to PCs and workspaces. So I do have one PC here up and running, but I do want to access this AWD via the workspace. So clicking on workspace, I'm going to show you how to properly connect to this. Now, what you want to do is click on the add workspace button, and it's going to ask you for a URL. Now, this is where it can get confusing because kind of what URL are we supposed to use here? All right, so the URL that we want to add in there is going to be similar to that of what we used for the web client. And in the description of this video, I do have that URL where you can literally just copy and paste it. So that's what I'm going to do right now. I'm going to copy and paste that in there. And when you do that, and by the way, it's rdweb.wvd.microsoft.com. It's going to say, okay, web URL, everything looks good. Okay, and then we're going to hit add. And now we're going to have that sign in option appear. So now I'm going to add my username and password, dropping in my email address and dropping in the password right there and hitting sign in. So this normally takes a second or two. And if everything goes as planned, we're going to see our development general right here. Now we can properly connect to our virtual desktop. So that is how you do it on a Mac. And if you have multiple monitors like I have, you will notice that all of the monitors will actually be used. It will be an extended experience, which is absolutely fantastic. So here you see we are within that virtual machine. We have everything running. We can click on settings. And by the way, in the bonus content of this video, I'm going to show you how to properly install Visual Studio Code as well as Docker using PowerShell scripts within Azure. So make sure to stick around. With that all said, let's get rid of this. Let's get out of this. I want to show you how to properly do this on the Windows side. All right, so to get access to your Azure Virtual Desktop on a Windows PC, there's one thing you do need to go and install. So you can see that I have my Windows PC open here. I want you to open up the Microsoft Store. Now, when you open up the Microsoft Store, one thing you do want to search for is Azure Virtual Desktop. Now, one mistake that a lot of people do is they try and install the remote desktop, which technically it can work, but as of when this video was shot, it doesn't even allow you to download it for some reason. It's just absolutely stuck at downloading and it says 0%. So it looks like that doesn't work anymore. But when you go and search for Azure Virtual Desktop, which is right here, you'll be able to install the Azure Virtual Desktop preview, which is in beta version, but it works just great. So once you've installed that and you open it up, you are going to get a window that's going to say, let's get started. It's going to ask you to subscribe. So go ahead and click on that subscribe button, which I'm going to do right here, and it will load up the login details. Now, similar to what we did on the Mac, I am going to use my username. I'm going to paste that in right there. Next, we're going to add the password, just going to drop it in there. And if everything goes well, it will connect and show us what we need to see. So we're going to give it a second to load up, and there you go. We can see our workspace, which is development general. So let's double click on that and go into this AVD. And there we go. It has successfully logged into our AVD. Again, I have multiple monitors. All of my monitors are successfully logged into this application, and I can see each and every screen. This is absolutely beneficial if you are a power user like a developer. Okay, so we have successfully connected to AVD using our web client, as well as using the remote desktop app on a Mac and using the Azure Virtual Desktop app on Windows. In the next chapter, I want to show you something cool. And this is kind of what I mentioned with that bonus content. I'm going to show you how to install applications using a PowerShell script in Microsoft Azure itself. So make sure to stick around. Okay, so this is the last chapter, and this is probably one of my most favorite parts of working with Azure Virtual Desktop, or AVD. And what we're going to do in this chapter is we're going to install Docker as well as Visual Studio Code as well as Git, but we're going to install it within the Azure portal. So let's go ahead and do that. All right, so first off, we are still in the virtual desktop here. I'm just going to move to the left here and go back to the Microsoft Azure portal. One thing that we do want to do here is navigate to the VM. So development-0, we're going to click on that. And on the left-hand side, we're going to scroll down. We're going to look for run command. Essentially, we want to run that PowerShell script. So right at the top, we have that option to actually execute that PowerShell script. Now, I do have a fully coded PowerShell script, and I'm going to see if I can drag it to the right-hand side here. And by the way, I've dropped this script in the description of this video, so you can literally copy and paste that. At the top of the script, we're checking if we have admin rights. If we don't, it's going to break right there. But if we do, though, we're going to run through this function. We're going to create a couple of jobs, and these jobs are going to be first to download Docker, then download a Visual Studio Code as well as GitHub. And once that's downloaded, it will properly install. Now, if we have any errors, we do have a try and a catch within this function. And drop in the comments below if you want me to explain a little bit more what this script does in more detail. Now with that, we're going to select all of it. We're going to copy it. Let's navigate back to Azure, and we're going to click on that run PowerShell script. It will open up, and what we're going to do, we're going to drop everything in there. Now, once everything is in there, we will hit the run command. Now, important to note that it does take some time to execute the script. You will see an output, and the output will be blank. That's absolutely normal. Now, once everything is done, and I'm just going to fast forward this a little bit, you will see that all of our jobs has successfully executed. Job 1, 2, and 3 has done. And on top of that, you will see that it downloaded Docker, it installed Docker, it also downloaded Visual Studio Code, and it also downloaded Git and installed both of them. And right at the bottom, it says all installations complete. So with that, navigating back to our virtual machine, when we click the start menu, you're going to see that these applications have successfully installed. Now, with all that said, using a PowerShell script is great, and it's great for if you only have 1, 2, or even 5 virtual machines. But if you have more than 10 or 100 or even 1,000 virtual machines, so let's say on an enterprise level, I would highly recommend rather to use Intune. Microsoft Intune is a great solution because you can set up specific automation tasks and processes to automate this entire process. By the way, drop in the comments below if you want me to create a specific video on how to do that.